We head home now and turn to the housing crisis. Checkpoint has obtained a scathing internal review of the emergency housing system given to the Minister of Social Housing almost a year ago. In it, the Ministry of Social Development officials described the system as incoherent, unfair and not accountable. Now, that was almost a year ago. Similar criticisms have been made in the past week, of course. The officials also recommend the Minister accept the emergency housing system is failing those who need it. Again, she received that advice in June of last year. Alex Ashton on the Ministry's own admission that the system is incoherent and unfair.
In May last year, Paula Bennett announced a review into the emergency housing sector and its funding. The first phase of that review was fed back to the Minister a month later, June 2015. Among its findings were:
New Zealand doesn't currently have a coherent emergency housing funding system. No clear accountability arrangements for the funding arrangements are unclear. Funding is ad hoc and not well coordinated. The term system isn't the best reflection of the current emergency housing funding arrangements in New Zealand.
That was last June. 10 days ago, nearly a year after the report reached the Minister's office, the government announced a $41 million spend in emergency housing. The money would go on a new grant paying for families to stay in a motel for 7 days and ongoing full-time funding for 3,000 emergency beds. Checkpoint has also obtained a list of work and income referred emergency housing in Auckland. In November last year, there were 61 providers on the list, but just 8 were specialist emergency housing providers. The rest, 53 places, were motels, hotels and campgrounds seconded for the purpose. Last night, Checkpoint visited one of those motels, where we met Nicole and her 3 children who were paying
$190 a night.
So how much is that a week?
$1,330.
And Windsor's paying for that, are they?
Yes, but I have to pay it back to them.
And next door, Tuani, her partner and her wheelchair-bound son.
Work and income have paid $2,400 and something for us to be here for 2 weeks.
So $1,200 a week?
Yes, practically yes.
DePaul House is one of those 8 emergency housing providers in Auckland. It can house 12 families at a time, and ideally would have space for families like Nicole's and Tuani's. It doesn't. The manager, Jan Rudeledge, isn't surprised by the scathing review, nor the soaring list of motels dubbed emergency housing providers. That's because she says funding for legitimate, non-profit providers is scant. DePaul fundraises 80% of what it costs to run. MSD pays about a fifth. So she says people are turned to motels and hotels costing hundreds of dollars a night, and work and income chooses which one.
There's not a lot of hotels, motels that are willing to take that on. There's a risk attached sometimes to the client base. People don't want to become known for providing occupancy to homeless families. It's not a good look, is it, for your hotel, motel?
Labour's social development spokesperson, Carmel Sepuloni, says the review reveals a broken system, which she says she sees in her West Auckland electorate every day. Homeless people who've been to Winds, been turned away and moved into motels. She says sometimes they don't know the money is a loan. She says society's poorest are being driven into debt they'll never repay.
One example is a budgeting service that I spoke to who had seen over 500 people in a year. The combined debt of those clients was about $5.5 million. The biggest proportion of debt was actually to government agencies, so it was around $1.4 million of that $5.5 million owed by this group of people.
MSD has previously said it doesn't restrict people's choice in hotels and only places people in them when there are no other options. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
So, the Ministry talks of incoherence. Is this possibly an example of it? A 2-bedroom state house was sold in Queenstown this afternoon, despite attempts by social housing advocates to stop the auction from going ahead. The Frankton Road home was purchased by Housing New Zealand in 2003 for $265,000. It went to auction today, despite attempts from the community trust Happiness House to persuade Housing New Zealand to retain ownership of the property. Housing New Zealand says it was sold because it's been vacant for some time and there's low demand for social housing in Queenstown. It says it only has 2 families on a waiting list. But this seems to contradict what Housing Minister Nick Smith said after a visit to Queenstown on Sunday. And on Monday, he told us on Checkpoint that the tourist town had, and I quote, an acute housing need, particularly, as we were discussing, for low-income workers. So great is the need, he discussed housing options close to the CBD that needed consideration.
I've got another 5 special housing areas that have been recommended by the council that will bring at least another 1,000 houses on stream. There's also some options of using Crown land. Yesterday I visited the existing Wakatipu High School. We're building a new school out in Frankton. We're exploring whether we should look to that site as providing additional housing.
Nick Smith on Checkpoint. On Monday, 3 days later, one of the properties Housing New Zealand does own in Queenstown is sold. Karen Stewart from the Happiness House Community Trust says there are currently 300 people on the Queenstown Lakes Community Trust House waiting list. And she's angry she only found out this morning the State House was being sold. She was at the auction with our reporter, Peter Newport.
Our next property brought to the market by the Osbornes is 402 Frankton Road on behalf of Housing New Zealand. I'll read the particulars of the property. It's legally and formally described as 402 Frankton Road. It's an estate in fee simple on 496 square metres. The property will be sold with the standard chattels of the stove, the fixed floor coverings, the curtains, the light fittings. It also has a wood burner and it also has a laundry tub, and you will note that in the garden there's a garden shed that won't be going anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, what a great location on the Frankton Road, above the Frankton Road, easy distance from town. The wonderful thing about this property, ladies and gentlemen, is in a private right-of-way it also offers off-street parking along the side of the house. Built many years ago by a colleague of mine, so I know the property extremely well. Opportunity to do a little bit of cosmetic surgery to add some further value. I wonder if we have an opening bid somewhere at all. 400,000 on the phone, 400,000. I'm looking for 20 now. 420 anyway. Thank you, sir, at 420. 420 in the room. 420 we have and looking for 40 now. 500 on the phone with Kate. 500 we have. 500 we are selling, ladies and gentlemen. 402 Frankton Road will have a new owner. We'll add to our pool of available stock for renting. 662 and a half. Courtesy straight back to you, sir, with a half if you like. Good time to throw in a 10. 663. 663 down the back.
665.
665. 665 on my left. 665,000. On my left, I'll take a half if you like, sir, and a half. 665 and a half. $665,500. Are we all done? The bidding down the back of the room. Let's do it again. I call it once at 665 and a half. Twice at 665 and a half. Third, final time at 665 and a half. It is going. It is going. It is sold. Congratulations, sir. 665 and a half.
So, John, there you have it, $665,000, an auction that social housing organisations in Queenstown wanted to stop. Now, with me is Karen Stewart, who represents those housing organisations. Karen, I guess you're not very happy about that outcome.
I was alluded to the sale of this house this morning about 9:30. We had seen that it was up for sale, but didn't realise it was a state housing house. And so I've made inroads. I've been talking to Todd Barclay. I've been talking to other social services. I've been talking to Harcourts. I've just tried really hard to have this house withdrawn from the auction just for today so we could have a debate about the fact that there is no need for social housing in Queenstown. It's outrageous.
You tried to reach Paula Bennett as well, the Minister.
I did. She's meant to be calling me back, and I did say to her, could you please, I said to her press secretary, could you please call me back before 12 o'clock today because I really need, this is an urgent matter. We will never get that money, that's $665,000 in our area, and our area so needs some support by our government for social housing.
Housing New Zealand are saying that there were no tenants available for the house.
I saw the Housing New Zealand list just prior to coming down here, and there was 2 people on the waiting list, which is outrageous because, of course, there's 300 people on the Wakatipu, the Housing Trust waiting list for a Housing Trust house. So there's obviously been a miscommunication somewhere because we know of so many people that are looking for houses.
But how can it reach the stage where this house is sold today at auction, and yet every agency in the area knows there is a very serious housing shortage and people are desperate for a roof over their head?
Well, I don't know. I'm so frustrated. Everyone in New Zealand should know that Queenstown has a housing crisis. We always have difficulty coming into winter with our housing crisis, but this time there's been no lull. There's been no period of time where people move around their houses. They're desperate to stay in their homes. People are losing their homes left, right and centre through Airbnb. Landlords, not house owners, are putting their houses into Airbnb so they can maximise their returns. There's nowhere for people to live.
Can you stop further auctions, do you think, if you have enough notice?
I could have stopped this one if I had more notice.
And have you given up now, or is there more to fight over?
No, we won't give up, and we don't want to fight. We want government, we want the council. I mean, the council is doing as much as they can, but we want the government to look at us and say, well, some of their money has to come into Queenstown for social housing. No, we're not giving up.